Look out!
Can't stay here forever.
Oh! Hey everyone, I just wanted to say how excited I am to critique one of my favorite games of all time. Well now, what an odd twist of fate. A mediocre game critic wants to use my world to save his show. How the average have remained, I suppose. So like, I'm trying to do a show right now. KBash, I am not here to give you my mark, but a warning. Tread carefully and respect the things you cherish. No politician was remembered for the roads he fixed, nor the problems he revealed. Cool. And what will you do? In a world on the brink of war, disease, and famine, what will you say? Will you come to the masses bearing poison? Or will you—
Oh my god, Dishonored is so good. If I'm critical at any point, I want you to know I hold the series in extremely high regard. And I'm taking shots as a fan, as someone who wants this series to be as sharp as possible. Dishonored's a game set in a world that really sucks. Well, like, not the quality of craftsmanship, you know, that's great. No, it's the swarms of feral rats, the disease turning people into weeping, almost zombies, the general slate color wash, and the terrifying realization that everyone present is extremely inbred. Ugh. The basics are easy, so here they are. The outsider slaps a very sexy tattoo on your hand, and now you can teleport, summon rats, possess people, crazy overpowered stuff. Otherwise, you cut the flesh, shoot the gun, throw the grenade, squeeze the heart, and use the powers, gadgets, and weapons available to you to stealth your way through industrial playgrounds, or the alternative: have fun playing the game. The game can be as meandering or quick-paced as the player dictates. The key is the player has to choose to make it happen one way or another. The beginner stumbles through levels, backstabbing enemies, getting in unwanted scraps, digging through piles of garbage for healing elixirs and coins, reading notes, opening safes, exploring the world presented to them. The expert ignores all that and finishes the hour-long level in a minute. It's nuts. That level of gameplay variance is incredible, and something the developers clearly pushed in every facet of the game. The crisp, brutal gameplay isn't the true draw to the series, but it certainly makes time spent in Dunwall worthwhile. The flow of combat has a twitchy elegance to it, a moment-to-moment dance of death, and the sheer number of tools available to the player allows combat to blossom in intricate and dynamic ways as the game progresses. Just moving, running, jumping, engaging with the environment has that same lively quality and encourages the player with a simple invitation. You can go anywhere and handle anything, any way you like. The environments are vast and varied. Despite the multitude of ways the player was considered while designing the environments, they don't feel exclusively invented for the player, like they could exist regardless of an outside entity. And they're constructed oftentimes in many levels and layers to provide scale, realism, and choice to the experience. Powers are the most interesting element of gameplay, and ass-shatteringly powerful. One swarm of rats can end a combat encounter in a few short seconds as long as you tack on a few sword swings. Possession gives you access to places you normally can't go, and indeed bypass many of the game's difficult sections. Being able to see through walls turns the game into a strategic stealth action game. You can literally bend time to your will if you'd like. Some of the powers aren't all-stars. Wind Blast is a personal favorite that doesn't really need to exist, but why not snap a neck by blasting a guy into a wall? Why not send guards screaming to their deaths? Even the more low-key powers like Bloodthirst and double jumping are still integral to changing the way the game is played, the way combat can play out. The fun is choosing what to upgrade, building your own playthrough, because you need nothing to win, but having perks never hurt. The real draw, however, is the world building. You can have all the choice-driven, satisfying gameplay in the world, but without a glue to keep players invested, Dishonored may never have been the success it was. But Dishonored is remembered for its world, a great parade of personality, as opulent as it is grimy, as playful as it is brooding. Dishonored is a feat, and this goes for every installment of world building done right, bespeaking the heights of verisimilitude, believability in all things. Every detail, from the food the characters eat to the shops they frequent's been considered. It's a good sign when they thought of where a building's inhabitants go to the bathroom. The characters you meet are, in reality, nothing but a series of voice lines affixed to a model, even by design, are little more than their clothes and how they wear them. But the way they're presented and contextualized in the world makes so many potentially one-dimensional characters feel real, from the voice work, because, you know, they hired actors. instead of voice actors. To the little moments of screen time they receive, to the letters signed in their names, the world always feels populated by humans, even if they're a little funny in the face. So we're left with a beautiful world and interesting things to do. What's wrong with Dishonored? Not story. It's fairly well accepted that Dishonored isn't a masterclass in storytelling, but it doesn't need to be. The story only needs to lubricate the moment-to-moment action, to string the player on just long enough to finish the thing. And it does that beautifully. The first betrayal is enough to convince a player that running a sword between a guard's shoulder blades isn't so bad. The second betrayal is enough to justify painting the walls. With the chaos system in place, killing and carnage will send the staggering Dunwall into a spiral, exacerbating the rat plague, the not zombies, the presence of guards, but all these things are what the chaotic player thrives in, swinging with abandon, felling swaths of ill-fated lackeys with style and speed. You've got to love a game that really gives you what you're looking for. The reverse is true, of course. Keeping body counts low only makes the game easier, but you're holding yourself to such a high standard doing that, it's only fair to the player. Other small issues exist. The game can be a lot to take in sometimes. Too much sometimes. Digging through scores of objects just hurts my eyes, and being met with a wall of tiny text on a note or a book forces an insta-close most of the time. What's interesting to me is that I favor combat, but another player surely exists who doesn't really care for it and hangs off every word of text, looks at every little fixture, and enjoys immersing themselves in the world presented. It takes a special kind of game to honor those differing views. Now, Dishonored's main issue, and it's been written about for years now, is the way gameplay and narrative just don't jive the way they need to. And they do usually, in 100 ways, but the critical incongruence is that freedom is the soul of the game, and freedom is ultimately not narratively rewarded. The game wants you, tells you to play good, to keep the kill count low. Shoot, it's the point of the narrative. You are Dishonored. The goal is to reinstate your name, recover from the blow to your image, but killing everyone is tantamount to confirming the false narrative the world spun for you. Emily, the Empress's daughter, turns into a bloodthirsty psychopath if your killer's self is all she's got to look up to. Even the boatman gets judgy, and he was the nicest guy in the game. So, for as much short-lived fun as the game's willing to throw your way in high chaos, you're made to feel like trash, but I didn't need the game to tell me that. It's so obvious that killing indiscriminately is wrong. I just want to enjoy the game. And let's be clear here, playing nice, playing stealthy is often the opposite of enjoying the game. It's save into failure, into reload, into failure, into reload, into progress, into save, into failure, into reload, etc. Furthermore, while the non-lethal options are intended to be cruel irony or poetic justice in general, the Boyle Mansion choice has you killing someone or sending them into personal, presumably sexual slavery, and it's like, you wanted me to do this? Dishonored is an incredible experience, and I recommend trying a stealth playthrough after the first. But if I wanted someone to get into the games, I'd say have at it, and ignore what the game's trying to say. It's too much enjoyment to lose for the sake of fulfilling a narrative goal. As an aside, the game goes for pennies on Steam, runs well on most machines, and with the 2 major DLCs, you can have an entire second game tacked on for just a little more. It's one of the most worthwhile games I've played from a consumer standpoint, and the DLCs are some of the best content for the game. New challenges, new enemies, expanded universe, awesome new environments. Getting to play as the guy who set off the story at all is super cool, and once you start freeze frame teleporting, you just can't go back, man. Dowd, his story, and the entirety of the DLCs are some of the most worthy content ever added to a video game. If you've somehow never gotten around to it, please take the time, run through at your own pace, immerse yourself in one of the purest expressions of creativity in video games. Yes, it's true. I'm a huge Dishonored shill. Buy everything.
Well, this is exciting. I can't wait to show you my game. After all, if you like the first that much, there's no way you'd mistreat the second.
Okay, so you're different. Not sure what to say. What gives?
Oh, me? The series needed some changes. And who am I to go against the grain? After all, you can't sell millions of copies without a glow-up.
What are you, a TikTok star?
I'm the future of this series. Go ahead, play for yourself, but be warned. There is tragedy in every success. You need only draw the curtain. Guy's a fucking psychopath, swear to God.
Dishonored 2 faced some launch problems that poisoned the experience for some, but thankfully we're living in a new decade and the game runs swimmingly. It's the epitome of the perfect sequel, an upgrade in almost every way, an expedition into the world, a plausible reinvention of the narrative, except for putting a gigantic bookmark here, and an unbelievable piece of video game artistry. This game is so damn good, dude. My only real complaint is, where's the DLC, guys?
Please give me a job, Arcane. I'll do anything.
The overwhelming impression the game left on me was this. The game was extremely f***ing fun. And it was fun because I slashed and maimed and disrespected the game from level to level, slamming walls to attract the guards, ripping through them like paper in the wind, tearing them apart with every gadget on my belt. The flow of combat was smooth and frenetic at once. A roaring rapid and a cutting canoe. Flaming silk. I'm also blown away by the level design, the sheer beauty of the game, the alternate pathways the levels allow, the verticality of the construction, the clockwork manor and time mansion in particular. This game is a triumph of level design. Basically, it retains every element that made the initial game tick, except now it's Noah's Ark. 2 of every animal shall board this ship. Rats and bloodflies exist. Corvo and Emily exist. Dishonored 2 ensures that for every problem, there's 2 ways to solve it, and it cranks the potential for customization up more than a few notches. Consider that before, Dishonored was never a particularly hard game unless you wanted to play on the highest difficulties where stealth was more difficult and enemies were much more lethal. I think the enjoyment people got from that game was the control given to the player, the ability to choose to cheat the system, abuse the outsider's gift to absolutely annihilate the opposition. So why not give the player more? The choice between Corvo and Emily is the choice between familiarity versus novelty, but you don't lose anything between them. People argue that this or that power is too broken, this or that character's better, but it's a single-player game. It's not competitive, and both are exceptionally fun. And if we're talking hard combat, both have the same baseline capabilities, it's just a matter of which flavor you'd like to try. Emily's inclusion opened up creative powers like Domino, letting you link enemies together for chain sleep darting, chain assassination. It's awesome. It's bottled creative freedom. Bone charms existed in the last game, little passive benefits you could slot onto Corvo to spice them up a bit, you know? Now you can craft your own! Yeah, okay, people who like that kind of tinkering, here you go. Good, you do that. I'll just keep doing the stuff I do, you know, don't mind me. Lastly, customization was improved with tons of upgrades. The first game had it. It made the coin collecting worthwhile by giving you direct power for searching the levels, and this game simply has more, and more interesting upgrades too, culminating in masterwork upgrades unique to your character. I love. So beyond all that, the level design is, can I use a power word? Resplendent. When I look at the Clockwork Mansion and think someone sat down and designed that shit, it blows my f***ing mind. That level, owned by a mad genius, is the single most perfect expression found in video games of the kind of house a mad genius would have. We're talking transforming rooms, the space behind the walls mapped out and interconnected, a death maze in the basement to keep prisoners in. This thing is insane. There's a mansion which strips your powers away, and that normally would suck, but you get a time jumping power to compensate. And because I was really into the base combat without abusing powers too much, the level turned into one of the best in the game. It's the kind of thing that starts mildly frustrating and ends with you thinking, how in the hell did someone design that? Genuinely incredible work. Add to that the immense verticality, the scope of spaces, the attention to detail. I think BioShock gets a lot of praise for how natural, how well built the levels are, the world is. But when I hold it up to Dishonored, it isn't even close in my mind. If you want more on the intense attention to detail the zones suggest, I recommend Purposeless Rabbit Hole's video on the subject. It's entertaining, illuminating, and required reading if you care. The game's chief improvement in terms of world building isn't the next bit of tinned food or cutely bottled pear juice or whatever, but the neutral zones where regular citizens of Karnaca exist. They're not attended to with the detail of an RPG, but they're a solid backdrop built on the same philosophy of the characters from the first game. Nothing more than clothes and voice lines, but believable in the moment. The art direction in general serves as a sharper image of the original world we were presented with. It really nails the vibe. Just fantastical enough to be an alternate world, but just gritty and grounded enough to be unbelievable. Now, if I were to criticize Dishonored 2,
And I would never do that carelessly.
stealth play is something I try to avoid in these games because while it can be rewarding, it often isn't. The save-reload loop continues, and load times suck. There's loads of options to make it easier, but it's complicated in other ways. Abnormal enemies like the clockwork soldiers are fun to stealth kill when you know what you're doing, but you'll have to restart a lot to learn them, or look online, which I did. Made the game 100 times better. I played on normal through all these games, and there's times you get noticed that just don't make any goddamn sense. I don't know. I'm not one for finesse anyway. I like it red. And everywhere. The real criticism, which is wholly subjective, should probably be leveled at the narrative, which the game is still struggling with, in my mind. To Arcane's credit, they established a villain, kind of, but more importantly gave her a series of named lieutenants who matter, who directly influence the city, and who I can at least name. If you ask me to name any villains from Dishonored 1, it's gonna be the traitors and Dowd. Can't remember a single other assassination target, and I've played through 3 times. So good on them for pushing their characters. On gameplay and narrative gelling, you're again asked by the game, by the existence of good and bad endings, to be good for the purpose of fulfilling the narrative, to re-honor yourself. Though I'll admit the choices involved are a lot less restrictive. You can still play chaotically and get the good ending, so that's a major plus. I guess in that regard they fixed the narrative prescriptivism of the past game. To be evil in this installment is to kill off beloved series characters for no real reason. Genuinely act like a scumbag. Obliterate Delilah's ranks. As for the story, Dishonored's in a weird position because of the unfortunate title. A dishonoring needs to happen, you know, as mandated. And to be fair, there's 100 ways to make it happen, but it's just a liability naming the series after a situation and not like a thing. Or a time, which leads to stuff like the first scene. The plot fails to inspire, at least from my perspective. In the first, the betrayals were swift, personal, and destructive. In contrast, this game's dishonoring is rushed, detached, and a potential blessing in disguise. Delilah, who Dowd killed, walks in ready to exact revenge on the Empress for the crime of nothing Emily personally did. She declares herself the true Empress by bloodline, and everyone in the room assists in an immediate coup. Well, to be fair, not everyone goes along with it, but there's no real resistance, and the plausibility of such a scene is questionable, even for fiction. It plays out like a rushed cutscene because it is, and doesn't inspire much, except to rescue whichever character is turned to stone. It raises more questions than necessary, if the first game is anything to go by. Why is Delilah alive? You know, Delilah, who Dowd killed. How did this coup happen? How'd they sneak all those clockwork soldiers in without Corvo knowing beforehand? Why does Emily really care about being Empress and her image? She mentions how much she wants to escape. This is literally her chance. Her only tie is rescuing Corvo, which, you know, fair enough. But I think you'd assume he's dead, you know, being stoned. If you pick Corvo, fair enough, but we're talking Emily right now. Pipe down. Look, I'm rationalizing about the scene. Let's stop. I'm not extremely motivated, but going forward, I'm still not. I'm motivated by the gameplay, not Daddy Sokolov reappearing apparently knowledgeable of the plot to usurp the throne, not the mystery of Megan Foster, aka Billy Lurk from The Knife of Dunwall, not whatever extremely silly magic reanimated Delilah, Chief David Bowie lookalike, who Dowd, not this Jekyll and Hyde knockoff, not any of the— you get the picture. A lot of past elements were revived because familiar, I guess, and the additions are bizarre. The first was clean cut, simple, dry, it got the job done. The story here adds character and a lot of camp. You could argue it's just the flame of Karnaca, you know? Dunwall is dull and gray. No patience for this nonsense, but anything can happen in Karnaca. Great. I quit this game the first time I played it, and I've watched another player quit, even though it's really fun, because it's hard to play Dishonored through the first time in full stealth with low narrative interest. Try it out, I'm serious. Pick up a sword, just start hitting things. It's fun. It's fun. It's really fun. Delilah thinks it's so fun. If anything, Dishonored 2 packs a ton of fun into a beautiful, well-designed game with no DLC to round it out. Dishonored 1 really only pulls ahead in total content available, and while being the first, it's probably truer to the original conception of the world, 2 offers a powerful thrill ride through the kind of environment, the kind of beauty you simply couldn't find in Dunwall.
It's weird, right? The game's a masterclass in world building. Shame the stories never really reflect that same dedication. I don't know. I know what you're going to say. You're too easy to read, KBash. Now you're going to fall in line with the online critics who hate this game. And then you're going to blame the writer they hired on Twitter. No, actually, I was going to praise everyone for a job well done. Okay, so I won't scream.
In another world, this video was titled The Rise of Dishonored. That's where I thought I was going with it anyway. Dishonored Death of the Outsider, or D3 as I'll be calling it, is an experiment. Half retail price, fundamentally based on Dishonored 2, about half as long, often considered DLC for the second game. It's not complete to the standards of the other entries. I think it's intended to be the tightest version of a Dishonored game to date. Like the other games don't really care all that much about balance, at least when powers are at play. They prop the player up and say, do what you want and how you want to. This game is far more restrictive, and perhaps it's to explore a more linear, more tightly designed facet of the series gameplay. But see, the problem is, I got this on sale for $14, and you can usually get Dishonored 1 on sale for $3, so the game is still Dishonored mechanically, it's still good and playable, but because it's a low-scope venture, it feels too short, too shallow, and too restrictive. And a pack of issues the series solved in previous installments re-emerge in the darkness while the designer's spotlight hones in on specific elements. The trade-off is DLC price, right? But in that vein, I would never recommend the third game to someone getting into the games, for fear they'd lose interest from a lack of interesting and varied powers, limited customization. You know, ass-blasting, overpowered player characters is kind of the soul of play in Dishonored. And I get this game is an intentional departure, but it's absolutely debatable whether it was worth it or not. Sales would indicate otherwise. You're limited to a handful of powers, so the strength is the developers know exactly what you have at any given time, and with the limited possibilities can design more tightly, presumably. I didn't notice any particular thing about the level design, any particularly razor-sharp construction, to be honest. I mean, the powers are clearly designed for facilitating a specific playstyle. We're talking no immediate access to double jumping or adrenaline/executions, and instead you get the teleport ability, the scouting ability, which will let you set a teleport marker, and the steal identity ability. If you've seen a speedrun of any level of this game, you'll know how buttery the game can play at the highest level, but that's only for the extremely committed. It'll play like all the other entries for anyone else, except like, no rats, no wind, I don't know. The bone charms are back and more important than ever because some major abilities are tacked onto them. Billy is pretty customizable in that regard, but it feels like she loses the fun, passive quirks from the past games for the sake of getting double jump back. More meaningful choices to make, less minute stuff. It's a pro and con all at once. Good. Because the game is shorter, you'll be relatively starved for tools and items compared to previous games, forced much more often to scrounge and dig for supplies. This isn't a problem for the speedrunner, but doesn't facilitate smooth play for anyone else. It definitely exacerbates my troubling case of dry eye though, so thanks for that. Actually, the economy of the game is worth bringing up. It's not likely that you'll be as powerful as previous entries, if not from loss of power, then from poverty. The same upgrade system from 2 is here, with fewer coins to go around. It's encouraging more tactical and tougher decisions overall, which I like in principle, but I can't help but feel deliberately weakened in a game where I'm killing a god. Now you can offset your poverty by doing work for other people, little side quests that require the player to do a specific thing in specific places, kill a guy and throw him into the river, make it look like a self-kill, you know, normal stuff. Except, it's entirely possible you won't get the side quests before visiting certain areas, so if you killed the 2 witches in the bank because they're, you know, Delilah's hench people, it's pretty awkward visiting the side quest board and realizing you can never complete the mission that involves killing 2 named witches because the game hadn't flagged them as named NPCs yet. I am absolutely not angry. Why would you say that? Or how about the problem I had where I needed more money for an upgrade and needed a really big chunk, but hey, one of the side quests wants me to go through the bank in full stealth, and it's got a huge reward. Okay, you know, no big deal. I've played these games, I can chill out for a sec. I ended up getting stuck here and having to check a guide online which required me to make 2 normally impossible jumps just so I'd get upgrades. I know I don't need them. I know I don't need health potions, but I had it in my head that I did. So I went through with it. It sucked. Almost every second of this miserable level sucked. I can't believe a narrative element in a Dishonored game convinced me to play in an unfun way. Notably, chaos is gone. No longer will the game adapt to your choices. It's nice not being directly restricted, I guess. So all this on top of 5 levels only, straight up lifted assets from the last game, which, you know, shouldn't be a problem because they're beautiful, but really make the game feel like a DLC. Limited upgrades and powers, man, I just wasn't into it. It may well be the game with the strongest design, but it didn't strike a chord, that's all. I just went around throwing bodies at people and killing them instantly. And now I get in trouble. D3's narrative is questionable, and I may be wrong for thinking what I'm gonna say about it, and I don't want to sit here and dunk on a team of hireable, credible, very well-educated people, but the team is comprised of academics and people with published editorials and all that good stuff. People who came from translator jobs, journalist jobs, people who wanted to write but needed money, which isn't bad, but with a team of 4 people of varied backgrounds, how'd we end up losing important facets of the games that came before? How did these things get through everyone? Anyway, take what I say with a grain of salt. I just didn't see this future for any of these characters. And frankly, I don't think it's a believable future either. But let's set the scene. Billy's trying to assist Dowd in killing the actual f***ing outsider, I guess. We watch the outsider hand you the means to kill him, which I would like an explanation for. Surely this is a bad idea. And for the rest of the game, this hardened assassin who once betrayed Dowd years ago starts simping the guy for no real reason, but daddy, let me suck. That's disgusting. It's just frustrating watching Billy go from the strong individualist she was to simp for no real reason, but aged sentimentality, I guess? It reads like a bad romance, and the fact that I noticed the writing at all is a bad sign. Friggin' rats. Sound like they were written by a first-year creative writing student trying to write insanity, but they stuck the words on rodents.
The friend listens. The friend hears us. One of us. One of us.
Ugh. The whole scenario is shaky. It's supposed to be a perfect closure to an era, brings back beloved characters. The stakes were never higher, but it struggles to answer some important questions. Dowd went from accepting his sins in the first game to blame shifting onto the outsider, like everything he did wasn't a choice. Billy goes along with everything, even adopting Dowd's damning phrase, "that black-eyed bastard." What's her motivation? We have to accept that she just really likes Dowd as a father figure and is willing to risk everything. Kill God for the guy. It's a bit odd for both killers to develop a weird morality in this installment. And they were both brutal murderers, to be clear. And morality really is the only bullet against the outsider here. His gift influences people to use their power over others. But what do these characters care? They've been doing that for years! It's so bizarre to cast the outsider as a villain, instead of a neutral narrative element. Was the series not about exploring player agency, responsibility in the past? What is this But no, Billy's the greater good, because she's gonna put the floating K-pop man down. The ending is spoiled in the title, so surely there's a twist, right? Yes and no. Power from the void is mostly severed from the mortal plane by the end, but nothing is shown, nothing new happens. You're told to kill a guy, and you do, in one way or another, and that's it. Nothing fundamentally changes how we look at the outsider, regardless of the character's backstory being revealed, because we're still intended to fulfill a narrative goal, cutting off the void to ensure peace and normalcy for humankind. That doesn't change no matter what we learn about the outsider. I was kind of expecting a, but is it really a good thing to cut off the void twist, or anything. And like, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut off the outsider's power. I like Dishonored as a series. The primary goal of the game is simply not what anyone who cares about the games wants to do. Titling your game is such a weird way to limit player investment. Also, man, just personal note, something rubs me the wrong way about killing Dowd off screen. I get that it's acceptable because he comes back later, but I don't know, he's a legendary assassin. Like, give him something, man. Give him anything. Poor bastard. I feel like I watched characters I was invested in age into unlikable schmucks. Dowd for unbecoming a likable and flawed character, Billy for casting off her own agency, the outsider for being an idiot. I have nothing but high hopes. I know they can kill it with the next installment, but is that coming? Where do they go from here? Can we have our power back? I don't play these games to be razor sharp, to be perfect, man. If I wanted to do that, I'd go play Ninja Gaiden on the hardest difficulty. I'd go play Mega Man Zero. I'd be a speedrunner. I like Dishonored because of the intriguing world and the creativity it allows players. And the chaos, man, all that juicy chaos. Oh, and then I shot the outsider. Haha, funny game man, shoot gun. Hey, it's KBash. Special thanks goes out to my $4 patrons, whose names are on the screen. The show's on its way somewhere good thanks to the community's generosity. And special thanks goes out to my extra generous patrons who are Errol, Aquari Wave, Azero, Bazcart, Boha, Caesar T, Chief, Color Crimson, Corgi the Lad, Crusader Bear, Don't Worry About It, Dylan Coffee, Frankenstitch, Huey, Jason Lasky, Jdeus or Jadius, Joke Frog, Justin Sherry, Kelvin, Lady Cerebellum, Lego Sid, Marcus, Max Gomez, Milky Moo Official, Orn Magnus Palson, Reggie Rodriguez, Salty Smasher, Super Sandwich Guy, Tom Krowick, Venom, Walter Taggart, Zane The Pure. If you'd like to help support the show and make it even better, check out my Patreon. We've got all kinds of goals and lots of rewards in store. Stay tuned for more. KBash out.